Welcome to the session on Mixed Method Research. I am Dr. Sybil Thomas, Associate Professor, Department of Education, University of Mumbai. Now, before we begin the session on Mixed Method Research, I would like to position myself. I view research as a set of interactive components which are not always linear. When we talk of research, we mean that research is a deliberate focus on rigorous data collection and analysis. I am an applied research methodologist and often work with individuals in a step-by-step process. And of course, a second generation of mixed method researcher. Now, when we talk of the social world, how do we understand the social world and our social life? Do we understand the world in terms of trends, graphs, statistics, or everything that we look around and understand in this world is based on cause-effect relationships or comparisons of groups? Or do we look at the world or the social life in terms of frames of study using theory? Another alternative that we could subscribe to is to understand the social world. We understand it in terms of individual stories, which we understand the world from different perspectives. There is always complexity that we see in situations that exist, and we build up theory from our understandings and our perspectives. Now, based on how we understand the social world, we also come across two different and yet apart qualitative and quantitative research approaches. Now, when we look at qualitative and quantitative research approaches, we look at it in terms of the general aim. That is how, when we look at research in order to understand questions such as how, what, and why, we are basically subscribing to the whole approach of research in terms of qualitative approach to research. But when we are searching knowledge by asking the question of how much, then we are subscribing to the quantitative research approach. When we look at research in terms of defining various concepts, and we are trying to look for patterns from a wide lens, that is from an inductive lens, where we move from examples to generalizations, or when we look at individual examples to come through certain kind of assertions, we are saying that it is that we are subscribing to qualitative data, qualitative research. But when we look at research in terms of variables, in terms of tests that we conduct, where in terms of isolates, and we define variables based on certain occurrences that we isolate, formulate hypotheses, and we deduce from generalizations to come to individual cases, we see that we are subscribing to the quantitative research approach. And therefore, the toolbox that we are using in qualitative data research is in-depth interviews, focus groups, participant observations, and document analysis, whereas in quantitative research, we conduct surveys, we use questionnaires, we use randomized controlled trials, as well as systematic reviews of occurrences. And then the focus, therefore, of qualitative research is we come up with rich descriptions of whatever we see is happening. We concentrate on processes and processes within a context. Whereas in quantitative research analysis, we are looking at making of predictions. We formulate outcomes which are generalizable. Now, this being the two different ways in which we subscribe to quantitative and qualitative research approaches, we come up with the third research approach, and the third methodological approach in social sciences, which we term as the mixed method research. Now, this method is more than the sum of the parts. It's more than just combining quantitative and qualitative research approach. What then has emerged? Based on quantitative and qualitative data and the various methods and methodologies that we use in both quantitative and qualitative data, and combining the various research paradigms as well as using different mixed methods and different designs together, we have come up with this whole idea of mixed method research. So therefore, mixed method research has contributions in terms of methods, methodologies, paradigm perspectives, etc., coming together to form the third methodological movement. Now, how do we have a fit between the two paradigms and design stance in research? Now, this, quoting Creswell and Plano Clark, we can say that we are aware that there are different research paradigms or different worldviews through which we look at research, and one of the worldviews that we would consider is the post-positive paradigm, as well as the constructivist paradigm. Now, in a post-positivist paradigm, the primary method of data collection or method of conducting research is the survey method. Now, in the survey method, we, as you are all aware, we collect data from a large sample, and the large sample of data that we cover is with the help of questions that are structured as well as unstructured, open-ended as well as closed-ended questions. Now, when we move from the post-positivist paradigm, where we believe that the kind of data that emerges are data that is from a positivist point of view, we move on then to build from there, to construct new knowledge, and we conduct therefore focus group interviews in order to gain or in order to evolve new type of knowledge. We say that we have the constructivist paradigm that we are using. So we see that post-positivist and constructivist can be used together using their different methodologies, such as survey, which belongs to a post-positivist paradigm, and focus group interviews that belongs to the constructivist paradigm. Now, in an attempt to look at research, we see that research can be viewed as falling along a research continuum, that is from a mono method or a singular method to a fully mixed method of research on the right side, and a partially mixed method located in the middle. You should be able to take any given research, study and place it somewhere in the continuum from mono method research to a fully mixed method research. You can also have the option of a partially mixed method research. Now, briefly, let's look at how did mixed method research really evolve. Okay, it began initially, but later got developed into a kind of methodology, and then moved on to a third research movement in social sciences. Today, it has become more defined. It grew in philosophical ways. It has its own philosophical questions that it answers with regard to what is knowledge, sources of knowledge, etc. It has developed even technically in terms of a fixed method of research. It has become a movement because largely followed in social sciences by many researchers. It has also come under criticism, and it continues to evolve as a methodology. So today, even as we talk of mixed method research, we are still talking of it as a methodology that is evolving and changing. Now, it evolved in the last 20 years or so. We see that we moved from quantitative research to qualitative research, and its beginnings can be seen in the 1980s and the 1989. And some of the main proponents of mixed method research are listed in the slide, from Jennifer Green, John Hunter, Alan Bryan, John Creswell, and Fielding, who was a sociologist in the UK. Now, why are we talking of this? Because the mixed method research evolved due to the questions of legitimacy of qualitative research. Questions with regard to the degree of reliability, validity, and whether qualitative research per se could be considered as a research methodology, gave rise to this third movement of mixed method research. We also saw that there is an increased interest in having two strands. That is, people wanted to work using both quantitative and qualitative strands in a particular study or multiple studies. And therefore, how then could the best of both the kind of research approaches be used, gave rise to this whole concept of mixed method research. And also based on individuals' quest for looking for newer methodologies in order to conduct research. Now, when we look at mixed method research, we are also saying that mixed method research is a style of research that uses procedures for conducting research that is typically applied to both quantitative and qualitative studies. And the purpose is to build on the synergy and to overcome limitations that exist either in using any one approach of research, and therefore combining, using synergy, overcoming drawbacks gave rise to this whole possibility of mixed method research. And therefore, to broadly define mixed method research, we would use the definition of Creswell, 2003, where he defines mixed method research by saying that mixed method research is an approach, is one in which the researcher collects, analyzes, integrates both quantitative and qualitative data in a single study or multiple studies for a sustained program or inquiry. Now let's go from hearing all what mixed method is, let's look at an illustration of how mixed method research can be used. And therefore, to look at it is when we use survey methods to identify specific groups of students, and then we use focus group as a methodology for conducting data in order to understand particular views or understandings of a specific group of students. We say we are using two different kinds of research methods. Another example is when a series of interviews are conducted to ascertain both critical issues bothering students, following which a survey is conducted in order to see whether these issues that emerged out of the interviews exist, to what extent they exist, and whether they can be really termed as variables or so. We say that is another attempt to merging two different methodologies. Now, why do we mix these two different methods? First argument for mixing is the insufficiency argument. That is, neither quantitative nor qualitative approach can fully give a proper understanding for a phenomena under study or an understanding of the social world. We can also look at the next argument, that is the multiple angle argument, which says that quantitative and qualitative research both give multiple pictures to a same occurrence. And we have the next argument, That is, the more the evidence, the better the argument, in that which propagates the belief that when we combine quantitative and qualitative methods, it produces greater reliability and greater evidence, and therefore better would be the research. The following two arguments are arguments that emerge from the researcher's point of view, that is, community of practice argument, which says that mixed method may be a preferred approach with a scholarly community, as well as an eager to learn argument, which says that it is the latest approach and therefore one needs to use latest understandings in order to understand the social approach. And the last argument we can say is mixed method research also holds its origin that when we live and understand the social world, we look at it from multiple perspectives, where we neither understand the world in terms of facts, symbols, numbers, etc., but we also combine perceptions, ideas, and experiences of people in order to understand the world, and therefore it mirrors real life experiences, and therefore we need to use mixed method approach. Now, there are 6 characteristics of mixed method research. Firstly, it is a collection of both quantitative and qualitative, that is data. So we have open-ended and closed-ended research, data which we use in order to respond to research questions. It is an analysis of both qualitative and quantitative data. So not only we gather them by quantitative and qualitative means, but we also analyze them. It is also a persuasive as well as a rigorous procedure for qualitative and quantitative methods, and we are using data that comes through these methods by either merging them, connecting them, or embedding them. The use of specific mixed method design involves either a concurrent or a sequential integration. Concurrent, which is it occurs at a particular point of time during our data collection. We use both these data analysis procedures at the same time. We say it as concurrent or one after the other, and we come to sequential integration. The approach to research, of course, this research, mixed method research, the main characteristic, it also has a philosophical foundation. Now let us look at typical scenarios where we use mixed method research. Firstly, a survey and focus group data are merged and compared. Survey is completed first. After the survey, if we want to get data in order to explain why we have got certain kind of information or data from the survey, we will use a follow-up focus group discussion. And therefore, we explain quantitative studies by qualitative data that emerge through focus group interviews, etc. Focus groups are conducted first. When we conduct focus groups first, it is primarily in areas where no data or a variable is not clearly defined, and therefore we conduct the interviews in order to get a greater clarity of a variable or a particular phenomena, or to arrive at a definition that is not really clearly defined, and then the information that is used from this focus groups, etc., are then used in order to construct an instrument for a follow-up with a random sample. For example, if we were to study abuse, now abuse per se is defined by different age groups, and different kinds of abuses would give rise to different kinds of definitions of abuse. But if we were to try to find out how do we develop a tool to understand the extent or the impact of abuse, we need to first identify which kind of abuse people have got into or have experienced or children have gone through, what were some of the kind of experiences that they have done where no data may be available. Therefore, we will do this is conduct focus group instructions and follow that up by constructing a questionnaire in order to validate, to find out the extent to which information we got through focus group, etc., is probably more reliable or valid. We also see in experiments, an experiment can be conducted and a qualitative data analysis procedure can be used in order to understand the impact of the experiment or to understand the various experiences that children or people have gone through during the experiment. We see that longitudinal study again is another kind of study where we use mixed method research. So a longitudinal study is underway with multiple studies that are organized to address a single overarching research objective, and then we see that in such kind of studies we use both quantitative and qualitative research. Now there are 3 types of research, mixed method research designs. Now these types of mixed method research designs come up based on the 3 characteristics, that is, the priority that we give to quantitative or qualitative research analysis, the sequence, that is, how did we collect quantitative or qualitative data. Thirdly is the kind of data analysis techniques that we have used in order to combine or to integrate the data. And therefore, the kind of priority, the kind of sequence, and the kind of data analysis technique will now determine the type or the design of mixed method research. Now you must be hearing this word mixed, but what really when you mean by mixing data? Now mixing is nothing but putting data together. Now in mixed method research, you have 2 types of data. Okay, we have quantitative data and qualitative data. Now, the timing, the implementation and priority, which we saw previously in the previous slide, would determine the design that we are using. So, when we take quantitative data, collect quantitative data and qualitative data almost simultaneously, we say and use them together, we say the data is convergent, or the kind of mixing that we have used is the converging technique. But when qualitative or quantitative data are collected one after the other, we say that we are using one kind of data to link or to explain another kind of data. We say that the primary focus here is to connect data. And therefore, we say that the kind of mixing is connection. We also have embedded data. Now, sometimes the study is predominantly quantitative based, where the philosophical paradigm used also for the research is subscribing to quantitative data, an experimental study to illustrate. In such a study, qualitative data may be just used as a part to explain or a part in order to throw more light on the kind of quantitative data that has been used, and therefore we say that this kind of data, when it is a part of a major approach, we call it as embedded data. Now, how do we mix? We see if you draw a continuum, you will have concurrent and sequential on one line and equal and dominant. If we take it into a kind of a matrix, when we are doing concurrent and equal, you see it will be quan plus col. Kindly take note that the kind of alphabets that are used, it is the capital case. Okay, so we see Q-U-A-L in capital, Q-A-N in capital. That means the weightage given to qualitative data analysis and to qualitative analysis is equal. Now, when they are placed one beside the other with the plus sign, it is nothing but the concurrent design, and therefore it is quan plus col. Now, when we have one of the kind of approach which is dominant than the other, but data mixing or data collection is taking place at a more or less similar point of time where they are merged together, the kind of data, and at the implementation stage we see that we call it as concurrent but dominant. To give you an example, when qualitative data is dominant, the weightage given is more to quantitative data. We write it as QUAL with the capital and QUAN with small, and vice versa for quan plus qual. But sequential, as we have seen before, when it is collected one after the other. Therefore, you have, but with equal weightage, you will have qual leading to quan in the form of an arrow, or quan leading to qual with an arrow that is being connected. And of course, in the dominant at the same time sequential block, we will have qual with capital because it's dominant leading to quan data, or following which quan data will be corrected, or you have qual with small, which could be lesser weightage to that, but it is collected first following which quan data, and vice versa. Now, depending upon mixed method designs are depending basically upon or they are classified according to two major dimensions. The dimensions being time order dimension, concurrent versus sequential, and paradigm, that is equal status versus dominant status. So it implies two different questions. One, do you want to operate largely within one dominant paradigm? That is, do you want to use a dominant style of design, or do you want to use an equal status design? So the answer to this question will decide whether we are following the paradigm emphasis of equal or dominant. Do you want to conduct it concurrently, that is roughly around the same time, or do you want to conduct it one after the other? That will answer the question of time order or concurrent versus sequential. And therefore, we have firstly three different models, that is the qual-quan model, the quan-qual model. Now here if you look at it, it is when you have qualitative research as the major paradigm, and qualitative and quantitative research and qualitative having both not equal status, that is qual more than quan, is used in exploratory mixed method designs, which I stated earlier. When data available about a phenomena, an occurrence, a case, an individual is not available, we go in for exploratory research, mixed method research design, where we begin with qualitative research and we end with quantitative model. Okay, so qualitative data is collected first. It is more heavily relied upon, and following which, either to validate or to justify, we use the quantitative research approach. The next is when quan gets a predominant status compared to a qualitative model which has a lesser status, we say it is an exploratory model. Like as I said, an experiment that you may conduct in order to see an impact of a particular intervention program, and you want to understand experiences of the participants of the experiment while they were going through the entire implementation program. So the main focus is conduction of an experiment, studying the impact, which is quantitative, and you understand perceptions, you understand reasons for good achievement, poor achievement with the help of certain qualitative methods, and therefore you say it is you using qualitative model, and therefore it is quan predominant, qual small. Again you have quan qual with equal emphasis, and that sometimes is used also or called as the triangulation mixed method design, where quantitative and qualitative data are collected concurrently and both are weighed equally. So notations, abbreviations to be noted, order of capitalization to be noted, and so the first to be read or the capitalized abbreviation is dominant, we need to take note of that, and if both are capitalized, it means both are equally worded. Let's take an example of a convergent design. I directly go to the example. If I want to study this high school student's attitude about smoking, then I would go about this study where the researcher analyzes a survey data using quantitative research. Then it conducts focus groups using, that is the qualitative approach, and then merges the two sets in order to see whether the data obtained in the quantitative and the qualitative they converge or diverge is an example of a convergent design. To put it diagrammatically, quan and qual equal weightage. When they are used to compare and give an interpretation, you say that you are using the convergent mixed method research. Let's look at the explanatory sequential research method. Going to the example, a researcher conducts a study to find out the significant predictors of adolescent smoking, and the researcher finds a surprising association between participation in extracurricular activities and tobacco use, and the researcher now conducts a qualitative interview with adolescents who are involved in extracurricular activities and tries to explain this surprising interaction that she has found out or association that she has found out between participation in extracurricular activities and the usage of tobacco. And therefore, you say that this is an explanatory study. So first it starts with collection and analysis of quantitative data, which has priority in this experiment, and the first phase is then followed. So data collection here is sequential. So it's followed by subsequent collection and data analysis of qualitative data, and we use qualitative data analysis in order to understand and give meaning to quantitative data, or to explain the quantitative data. We say we are using the explanatory design, and therefore as the arrows show you, the arrows and the abbreviation, weightage quantitative predominant, followed up by qualitative with small QAL, then data analysis and results are done and interpretation is arrived at. So that was the explanatory, and we come to the exploratory design. Again, the research, let's go directly to the example. The researcher collects qualitative stories about adolescents, then adolescents attempts to quit smoking, analyzes these stories about adolescents, their efforts that they have made, their experiences in the attempts to quit smoking, identify context, conditions, strategies, consequences of adolescents to quit smoking, and considering all the resulting categories and variables, the researcher now develops a quantitative instrument in order to assess the overall prevalence of these ways of quitting smoking in adolescents in a larger sample. We say that we are then using the exploratory design. So the design begins by prioritizing the collection of analysis of qualitative data, and second, quantitative phase is to test or generalize the initial findings that we have found in the qualitative phase. Now all these three methods, that were the exploratory, the explanatory and the convergent design, you see that you have three common things that we need to take note of, that all of these studies were similar, but based on the way the data was used, the timing of the collection, the priority of the kind of data, we see that we came up with different designs. That is explanatory, exploratory, concurrent. So same research study of smoking in adolescents through 3 different methods. Thank you. The overall prevalence of these ways of quitting smoking in adolescents in a larger sample, we say that we are then using the exploratory design. So the design begins by prioritizing the collection of analysis of qualitative data, and second, quantitative phase is to test or generalize the initial findings that we have found in the qualitative phase. Now, all these 3 methods, that were the exploratory, the explanatory, and the convergent design, you see that you have 3 common things that we need to take note of, that all of these studies were similar, but based on the way the data was used, the timing of the collection, the priority of the kind of data, we see that we came up with different designs. That is explanatory, exploratory, concurrent. So same research study of smoking in adolescents through 3 different methods. Thank you.